And I had this guy come to me and say, hey, my kids are thinking about leaving the province. I don't want to have to pack up to see my grandkids in another province. I'd rather find places for them here. But I love my community. I've lived in North Delta for 40 something years. And it's a vibrant community. I don't want it to change. And my message to him was the community is changing. Whether you want it to change or not, it is changing.
Welcome to the Tom Storey Show with Steve Karrasch and Tom Storey, where we discuss everything real estate or whatever else is on our minds.
Welcome back to a very special episode of the Tom Storey Show. This week we had on the Housing Minister of BC, Ravi Kahlon, and we had a great discussion about the new plan that they have that's not officially announced yet, but is coming, called the Homes for People plan. So this is a special midweek episode with the interview with the housing minister. We want to say thank you for being here. If you're watching this on YouTube, before we get into the interview, I just want to ask if you can hit that like button and also subscribe to the channel if you have not already and you find this information valuable. And if you're listening on the audio platforms, well, I hope you like a bonus episode this week. Steve, any thoughts just before we play the interview here?
My thoughts are awesome dude.
Yep.
Really knows what the plan is. And I'm just super grateful that someone from a political office is willing to come on and talk to us silly guys and really get their ideas out there. So we want to have more discussions like this because I think no matter what you think of levels of government or anybody's position on housing, nothing gets done without better discussions. And I'm just super stoked we could get this out there.
I think it's awesome. I really hope you all enjoyed this interview. We'll play it for you now, and then we'll catch up with you at the end. Enjoy.
Minister Kahlon, thank you so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate your time, and we're going to take up as much of it as we possibly can. So please just don't be shy. If you got to go and this keeps going, just cut us off. We're totally okay with that. But I think this is a very, very important discussion to have given kind of the housing crisis that's going on and the affordability issues that we're seeing right now. So welcome to the show, and we'll try and keep it on board here. I tend to sidetrack often. So I want to get your housing plan out to the people because I think this is the right platform for it. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys, and I really appreciate what you guys are doing. And I know it's one of those things that starts off with a pet project and continues to grow, and so I'm excited to be here.
Well, thank you for being here. So I want to give you a bit of a background. So I'm in Toronto. Steve's in just outside Vancouver. He's in Surrey. And we basically started this just to see what happens, and now it's growing. But Steve's going to pepper you with housing questions because everything that's happening in BC, and we just had the blanket upzoning happen in Toronto as well. So it's similar questions we're going to have. But before we get into housing, just for a second, I want to know, being a politician, I look from the outside and I look in, I go, even if someone does everything they think is going to be best for the community, work so hard, spend all these hours, are super passionate about it, still half or a third of the people don't agree with what you do. So I just want to know, how do you handle that? Because that's got to be a hard gig.
Yeah, no, that is tough, to be honest with you. You go into a room with 100 people and there's 150 opinions, and especially when it comes to housing, right? And so this is just the nature of it. And because people are passionate about it. And so I always remind myself, I learned quick actually, being in politics, that it's good to hear other people's opinions, even if you don't agree with them. I have people who are, anti-vax. They come to my office to talk to me. I give people space because in the end, you might learn something and you may actually see something from a perspective that you didn't see before. And so I really go into this with eyes open. And, but it can be challenging, especially when housing is so personal and so important for people because not everyone's going to agree. And I say that to mayors all the time. Now we're doing some things. We're going in pretty heavy with local government. And I always say to them, listen, this is not personal. These are things we're doing. And if it gets personal, then we've gone a little bit too far. And so, it just comes, you got to have thick skin in this job. And I've learned that. I learned that real quick, actually.
And I think as Canadians, dinner table conversations goes like, what's going on with the local hockey team? Then we get into politics, and then we get in housing. And you've got politics and housing covered, so I'm sure your dinner conversations are fun. I know Steve's got specific questions on housing, so let's jump right into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to get into the municipal level right now because I'm in Surrey and we've got our own municipal stuff going on. But your government has come out with the plan. I guess it's not really the full plan that's coming, is my understanding. Like, this is more to come in the future. But I went over and reviewed, and I've been reviewing and being critical of some points, of which you've just pointed out. Everybody's got multiple opinions on different things. But the Housing for People plan has an outline, at least at this point. So what we want to do is have you on here. And the specific thing that I think is going to be most interesting to most people listening to this is going to be what the heck is going to be going on with single family zoning in the province of British Columbia, and when does that come into play?
Yeah, and Tom, you'll know when the Ontario report was created around the strategy, or the advisory group was put together, they also recommended something similar as what we're doing, which is to move to allow 4 units on single family lots in a large way across the province. And I know they only went to 3, but we're going all the way through with ours. And so what that means is right now we're engaging with UBCM, with local governments, to ensure that we get it right, because my goal with that part in what Premier Eby has asked me to do is not just say we want up to allow 4, because what we learned from California was if you just say that, local governments will use easements, they'll use heights and setbacks and parking to put barriers in the way for this type of housing to be built. And so what we're doing right now is we're engaging with local governments. We're listening to them on, things like, what happens if a community's on septic? What happens if the community doesn't have, if they're a small community, they don't have infrastructure to be able to support the 4 units? What happens if there's a hazardous area? And so, as you can imagine, it's very comprehensive, detailed work that has to happen. And so we have staff right now engaging with our partners to figure out how will this look in communities, because it'll look different in Metro Vancouver, it'll look different in Rupert. But we want to make sure we have an overall framework across the province. 3 will be the floor. And 4 will be for larger lots that have many of these elements that I've highlighted in. And I know that many people come to me and say, well, what are the specifics? What's the lot size? What are that? If I had that, I would have bring the legislation in already. We wanted to make sure we heard from local government on that. But when we do come this fall with legislation, it's going to say up to 4 units with this much parameters. And it's going to say, here's what we believe the heights should be. Here's what we believe as minimums, what the setback should be. Here's what the minimum around parking should be. And parking, I mean, that's an entire 20-minute show. I'm sure we could do just on that. Small scale multi-units, guys, is one part of it. There's actually, what doesn't get talked about as much is we're going to actually go with more density when it comes to transit corridors. And so when you look at frequent transit areas where bus comes often, we're going to be going with additional density with parking requirements. When it comes to, say, SkyTrain and bus stations, we're going to be going additional density. And so all that legislation is coming this fall.
So with that, again, you just basically said, hey, there are no specifics. You guys are doing your due diligence at this point in time to find out what the specifics are. When I think about this plan affecting my community here in Surrey, and the most common lot in Surrey for older zoning anyway is, let's say, a 60 by 120.
Yeah.
In my mind, the government is saying now, very likely, we're just going to turn each one of those individual lots into a 3 or 4 unit townhouse development. Is that kind of what you have in mind? Are these going to be minor apartment buildings? Like, what is the framework that you've discovered so far?
Yeah, I mean, what we've said so far is that we're going to allow up to 4 units, and so we've had many people come to us and say, well, what if we want to stratify them and create 4 independent units? And so, of course, I mean, that's likely going to be the path forward, because the reality is we can't say we want to build affordable units for people and then say, oh, by the way, you have to build the entire thing and have all 4 units. It just it won't serve the purpose. And so there's been a lot of other suggested fee simple and all these pieces. So we're considering all the options. But in the end, and Steve, you'll know this. I mean, people want to ensure that their communities are vibrant. I tell this story. When we launched our Homes for People strategy, I was door knocking in my community, and I had this guy come to me and say, hey, listen, I get it. Like, my kids are thinking about leaving the province. I don't want to have to pack up to see my grandkids in another province. I'd rather find places for them here. But I love my community. I've lived in North Delta for 40 something years. And it's a vibrant community. I don't want it to change. And my message to him was, the community is changing. Whether you want it to change or not, it is changing. The structures might not be changing, but who can afford to live in the community has been changing probably over that 40 years. And so how do we ensure that we have vibrant communities so we have kids in our neighborhoods again? Because a lot of communities in BC right now don't have it. Now, Surrey's a different challenge. Surrey is getting tons of people. We have needs for additional schools, but Surrey and Langley are kind of facing that, partly because SkyTrain extensions are going that direction. But that's not the case in many parts of Vancouver, where they're talking about selling school lands in West Vancouver and North Van and Oak Bay. And so, so we're going in this direction, Steve, and we're going to lay out pretty clearly the framework. And, if we were the first ones to do it, I'd be really more cautious about it. But, we've seen California. We've been talking to officials in California about how they've gone about it. Portland, we talked to legislators from Washington State who are pushing to get this direction going. So we're learning from many of the jurisdictions on the West Coast. And of course, we've met with folks from New Zealand about their experiences and how it worked for them and their outcomes. So we've got a bit of a model. It's not perfect for BC, but we'll make it perfect for BC.
Ravi, I think, when we look at this entire plan, the goal is to bring more inventory to the market, right? And to hopefully bring down housing prices or not have them go up at the rate that they've been going up before. But the one thing is also the replacement cost of building this, right? And bringing it to the market. So just any thoughts on, like, building inventory is one thing, but we all talk about this word affordable housing, where I think it has different definitions depending on who you talk to. How do we build and speed up the process and not have the city maybe take as much fees as they were before, so we actually create housing that people are maybe listening to this, renting right now, being like, this is great if you build it, but I might still not be able to afford it.
Yeah, and I always talk about the certainty around housing, or the lack of certainty when it comes to the process. And so there's a couple things that we're going to be doing. One is we have to depoliticize decision making when it comes to housing. It is just way too political right now, and I feel bad for mayors and councillors, to be honest with you. It's hard being a local councillor when you have a housing project come forward, we're in a housing crisis, and you have 20 people line up telling you how evil you are for cutting down that tree, or letting these people into our neighborhood. And how do you make a decision when you're not hearing from those people that don't have housing, who can't find a way to be off of work because they're working 2 jobs to come to your public hearing that is at the most weirdest time. And so the process is not working. And so what we will be doing is moving towards reforming how decisions are made in local government. And so what I mean by that is, one of the most frustrating things for me is communities go and build a community plan, right? They have their OCP. And so when the OCP is built, and somebody comes forward, whether it's a not-for-profit partner or a private partner, private sector partner, they say, here's our project, it fits within your OCP. And then they have to go through the entire process again and do a public hearing. What was the purpose of doing the OCP? What was the purpose of that? And so we passed legislation this last fall, actually, to allow local governments to opt out from a project to go to public hearing when it fits within the OCP. Now, only 6 communities took us up on it. Delta, my community, is one of them. So the first project in our community is a high-rise on Scott Road. It's about, I believe it's like 19, 20 stories. In North Delta, that's a big deal, right? but it was within the OCP of what the community decided last year. And so I got people lining up in my office saying, because one of the councillors said, if you don't like the fact this is not going to council, go talk to the MLA. Oh, by the way, he's the Minister of Housing. So they lined up in my office. I brought them in. And so we had a big discussion about it. And I said to them, were you engaged in the community planning? And they said, yes. And I said, well, what's the problem? Like, this project fits within the OCP. You agreed this should be there. What is the problem? And many people don't have an answer to that. So a few communities took us up on it. But we're going to be, I think, a little bit more forceful on that, because we gotta unlock that block that's there. That's one. The second is cost. We have to reform the cost piece. We had a project, the province, 70 affordable units for low-income seniors in the interior. New council comes in, we're moving along well, and they say, oh, by the way, we need you to increase parking, and we need you to increase your CACs. And I'm like, Mayor, like, this project's not going to fly. And if that's happening to me, low income project, it's happening to everyone. And so we're going to reform how financing works this fall with legislation to create more certainty, so that when somebody comes in the door and they're about to propose a project, they know in the beginning what the cost is. No negotiating halfway through when you're already in. And then you feel like, okay, now is it going to be sunk costs? Am I going to be, and so we're going to create more certainty. It's going to be edgy. I know that there's going to be some bumps. We'll fix it along the way. But those are two important things I think we're going to use to create certainty.
I think what you guys are doing and what Ontario is doing does take some guts, right? Because you got the NIMBYs coming in and just saying, I don't like this. But when you say, why don't you like this? The answer is usually just like, well, I just don't like it because it's going to impact me directly, thinking about nobody other than them. And we know that even when this plan goes into full place and it's happening, it's not like the problem is solved in the next 3 months, right? This is a decade thing we got to look at. So do you anticipate that when this goes into effect, whenever it does, and the building starts and people are, changing their properties and things like that, will it impact the rental market first, probably bringing more rental market inventory? Or is this really for people trying to get into the market, it'll bring more inventory for them?
I think it'll impact both, and it'll be gradual. I mean, you nailed it. This is not a, like, some people have this vision in their mind that all of a sudden every house is going to come down and all of a sudden it's going to be like fourplexes and, high and towers. It's just not how it works. It's not how the market works. It's going to be gradual. But we know it's going to increase the supply of housing instantly. But for us, it's demand and supply, right? And so, like BC, we had 250,000 new people come to British Columbia in the last 2 years. I mean, that is huge. I mean, that is record breaking for British Columbia. And that's great. We have the strongest economy, one of the strongest economies in the country. People come here for opportunity. We need that talent. But our housing just has not been keeping up with that. And so what we're focused on is, removing barriers for more housing to be built faster. I didn't even get into the digital reform pieces that we're working on, but we can if we have time. Second is to get a whole new mix of housing on the market. So it's not just single families and towers, but all the type of housing, the types of housing people want. And then government's gonna have to get back in the game. If you look back in post wars times, when we were in similar types of crisis, government stepped in and played a huge role. If CMHC says we need 1 million housing units, that's how far behind we are. If you total up the amount of units that would have been built by government in from the mid-90s to now, that when they backed away from housing, you would actually have close to the amount of housing that we're behind. And it's a reminder that this isn't just get out of the way and the private sector will deal with it. This is a partnership. The private sector will play a role in some parts of the housing. The not-for-profits will play a role, and government's going to have to play a role. And it's just the reality of it. It's a lesson we've learned from all of these experiences we've just gone through. And so we will be stepping back in the game. And what we're doing right now is we're creating an inventory of all government-owned lands, all Crown Corps, all school boards, municipal-owned, federal-owned lands. And what we're going to do is we're going to do an assessment to identify what is developable. And what we're building right now, and we're calling it Build BC, is once we have that inventory, we're going to start with a pilot, 10, 15 properties across British Columbia. We're going to go to the private sector and say, here's what we want. You go ahead and come back and bid on it. Once they've kind of assessed what they can price, what price point that they can build, what it might look like, we're gonna remove all barriers, because in government we have powers to get through a lot of roadblocks, but we've never used them. And so we're going to create tools to allow us to move all that process into a shorter time span. And between the savings from time and the savings from the land, we're going to be able to build truly affordable units for people. We're going to start with rentals, but we're going to go into home ownership in the years ahead.
A quick, Steve, I want to set you up for this. So a dirty word in real estate is taxes, and taxes so far has been the word. I know. You can see where I was looking at you, and it's been something that we know it's come in and it's brought the government a lot of money, but it hasn't solved housing prices yet. Right now, we know it's a supply issue as well. So, Steve, I wanted to set you up for. Is there more taxes coming? Does this help with this? Steve, do you want to ask?
Yeah, I wanted to focus. So we have a fundamental difference between your position, generally speaking, and ours as real estate agents. Is when we think about affordable housing, we think about that first-time buyer trying to get into property, or a senior trying to downsize into something and live off of their nest egg or whatnot. Often in politics, it's thinking about the renters and what they need to do on a month-to-month basis. But one of the biggest stumbling blocks that we see, I know Toronto sees it for sure, Vancouver sees it. I did a video on my channel about it. I want to say in the city of Vancouver, when I did my research, a $750,000 to $800,000 unit saw something like $178,000 worth of development fees going to the city in different spots. So with fees like that and those barriers in the way, I don't know how we can make at least units that you can buy more affordable, because almost a quarter of the cost is going to just what I view as just the city or the government's just taking their chunk.
Yeah. Well, Steve, what I'll say on that is, and first off, I spent 8 years in banking with Royal Bank, and so I worked with the real estate industry for 8 years really closely prior to me getting into politics. And so I get the realtor lens that goes into the conversations. But, see, when we announced the Homes for People strategy, what was the reaction we got? Right away, it was, what about our infrastructure? What about our schools? What about transit? And the reality is true. We need to invest in all those things, and so do local governments. I think where there's a gap is often when those fees are collected, there's not a clear sense of where those dollars are actually going. How are they actually helping the infrastructure? Where are they helping the infrastructure? And so partly what I was saying earlier around the finance reform that we're looking to this fall, it's going to create more certainty, on the cost on the front end, but it'll create more certainty on where those dollars are going. So when somebody pays a DCC, they understand that it's going towards this type of infrastructure, XYZ infrastructure in our communities. I think once you kind of bridge that gap, I think it'll solve some of the problem, because right now it feels like, and in many communities it is the case, that DCCs and CACs, which are I think more problematic, go towards operating for local government. And so it becomes how much can we squeeze out of this project in order to help pay for other things. And so we need to find a balance in that. And so that's what you'll be seeing this fall coming from that. But, the truth is that, we need the revenue for things. We need the revenue for infrastructure. Local governments are, always complaining about not having enough dollars for infrastructure. And I get it. But I want to make sure that when those dollars are collected, they are going for infrastructure. They are building the important things we need in our communities. And so that piece of legislation that's coming in the fall was the one I said it'll be a little bit edgy. There may be some local governments that are, perhaps not delighted about what we're doing, but we're engaging with them right now on what that will look like.
Yeah, so it's tough for me. I just come from the perspective of, I'm in Surrey. I feel like we are always, I guess everybody probably feels this way, but I feel like we are always the one at the last, we're thought of last. We're the second biggest city here. We're growing like crazy. And we don't get a lot of that infrastructure. Sure, the SkyTrain plan is lined up now, but Port Moody's had SkyTrain now. A town of 35,000 people has had SkyTrain and better access to it than I feel like we do, because there's this tippy top in North Surrey where we actually have things like transit. So that's where someone like myself is on the NIMBY side a little bit, because parking is a massive thing that we can't just shrug off, right? So this is why I'm really happy that you're here, because I would love the opportunity to continue a conversation like this and reach enough people, because what I hate personally is not having open discussion.
Yeah.
Right. And I love the fact that you are taking time to come on stupid little shows like this one, we're going to call it that, and get this message out there, because the legislation that you guys are bringing in, or this housing plan that you guys are bringing in this fall, is going to completely change the landscape of BC. Personally, I think it's about time. Most governments now, no matter if it's political or not, each side of the aisle, are going this way. They realize we need densification, and areas like the Lower Mainland and the Greater Toronto area, we're maturing. We're no longer white picket fence, 7,000 square foot lot type of communities, right? And we have to get on board with that, with all of its terrible parking, and do we have enough sewer to fit that type of density, and all those issues that come along with it. So I really appreciate your time coming on here.
Yeah, I would say, Stephen, this is not something to be afraid of. Like I always tell people, this is not something to be afraid of. This is just evolution of our communities. We're going to continue to make sure that our communities are vibrant. We're building schools, hospitals, all those things that we need, that infrastructure we need. We can do that and have housing. It shouldn't be a but. And so, but I appreciate you guys having me on. You guys, I love what you're doing. I'm glad you guys are doing this, engaging people, and it's good to be a little edgy. It's the only way you're going to get people interested.
Exactly. Well, I think BC's lucky to have you involved, because you're obviously a very smart, educated person who's passionate about this. You can tell when you're giving answers, like you really truly believe in what you're doing. I think that's awesome. Again, whether everyone agrees or disagrees, I think it's good to have passionate people in those positions that are actually going to make change. The final thing I wanted to ask was, not that your days are not busy enough with people showing up at your office, but if someone listens to this or is watching this on YouTube that wants to connect with your office, what's the best place for them to go to ask questions?
Well, people can, contact us through social media, through Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and message. Quite frankly, we get tons of communication, and sometimes it takes a couple of weeks for us to get back to everybody. So I apologize in advance, but I have people that tag me on interesting articles, interesting podcasts, videos that they've seen. And it's great. When I have time, I go through and scroll through and read the articles, so people can reach out and share their thoughts and ideas. Again, we won't always agree, but in the end, I think we all agree that what's been happening is not good enough, and we have to find better ways to move forward.
Totally agree on that. Thank you so much for coming on. Steve, you want to wrap?
Yeah, I just want to say one last thing, and we're going to let you go. In the event that this seems to work out and you think that it's a good idea to talk to us again, when this full plan is announced, whenever that is, you're more than welcome to come back. We'll give you as much time as you need, because obviously housing is the biggest thing in our lives and in most people's lives. So we'd love to give it more opportunity. And I really appreciate you fitting us in here, like just jamming us in. This is coming out as a special episode on our podcast, so we appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, guys. And later this fall, perhaps I can come back on if you would have me. And then I'm also going to go to Ontario to push my colleagues out there to do a little bit more as well. So I'll be able to report back soon.
Ontario's known to copy BC about 3 to 5 years later on most things. So I'm not surprised to hear that at all.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Kahlon.
All right. Thanks.
Take care. Cheers.
All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed that interview with the housing minister. Steve, initial thoughts? I thought he was just a really nice guy.
Great dude. Absolutely great dude. I guess I've heard a lot of that before, covering it on my channel. It's interesting to find out where they're going and what the plan is. Basically what I know he probably can't be as opinionated as I am. He's got to be a lot more nice, but I just hear like, you know what? We got to get over this fact that this NIMBYism is here. It's got to go. We got to adapt to the amount of people that are coming into the biggest markets now. I think where we fail to think about housing is, and I do this for sure because I only specialize in my market,
right?
But he has to keep an eye on, what's going on in Campbell River, what's going on in Prince George, what's going on in Kelowna and Surrey and North Delta and South Delta all at the same time. So it's a much tougher job that obviously I wouldn't want to have. But I just think there are opportunities, and obviously we're always worried about the missteps that will come with it, right? There's going to be positives and negatives for everything that comes along. But generally speaking, I have to say I am on board with the overall idea of densification. And I don't know that it's going to bring house prices down or make things more affordable.
But could it stop house prices from going up as fast, right? Because that's the other side here. I think it could.
With the amount of people, well, sure, but with the amount of people coming in.
Sure.
I mean, I know it's a sensitive topic, but do you think that, like, so we had 465,000 new PRs last year, and then another like 600,000 non-permanent residents. Do you think that we should go back? Because I want to say pre-pandy, I think we were 265,000 people a year.
Can you tell me what changed between, well, maybe just because we had no immigration during the pandy, but what was it that Trudeau then had this big goal for more people coming in? Like, is it strictly just job market and we just need this growth in the country because Canada just passed 40 million people? We are growing rapidly faster than previous generations. So it's more than just housing, right? Housing's just a piece of it that gets impacted a lot.
I think it's just a general plan. I mean,
Just
we
a
should
plan.
not be talking about this because we don't know anything about it. But I think immigration just has to be the plan of, hey, we've got a generally speaking, low birth rate.
Yeah.
And we have to prop this up because
Hey.
our levels of government are spending money. So if we don't get the levels of government on board with spending less money.
I had someone comment on one of my videos and blame me as a real estate agent for Canada's low birth rate because of housing prices. So, but you know what? Obviously, maybe misguided at me, giving me that type of power over Canada, but is interesting to say that maybe because of the housing prices and the housing situation, that people can't afford to have the number of kids that they used to have because of how expensive. You don't think so? I think there's some truth to that. I think there's a little truth.
I think the level of expectation of keeping up with the Joneses, as we call it, and having kids. So, for instance, in my day, as I geezer out here a little bit, like, there were poor kids, man, and we weren't that far off of them, and we didn't have everything. And just our society thinks that you need to spend $1,500 on a 1-year-old's birthday party. Right. So until we get away from that, of course, having kids is not expensive. It is not expensive. It is expensive if they have 7 dance classes per week and 4 soccer practices.
What do you think the kids are just going to play with rocks all day? They're going to have to do something.
Well, that's the thing. They're not outside throwing rocks at each other and learning that throwing rocks hurts, right? So now they just throw rocks online verbally.
Virtual
rocks online. But like, so this is a big problem, right? Now that I've got 2 kids, I think people not having enough kids is a big problem. And I don't just think it's a big problem for our society on a tax base. I think it's a problem for our society just moving forward. Like, we need to have more kids. One of the things, I've been having this thought a lot lately, having kids is really shown me what's wrong with me. Because when I will look at my kids doing anything and I hear my own voice come back, or I see a mannerism that they have that I know I have, that's the most valuable thing about having kids is learning about yourself, right? And for me, sometimes that's learning how big of a-hole I can be, right? But I don't see it until I see somebody else doing it. So either maybe a lot of people that have kids that just absolutely think their kids are awesome all the time are just narcissists and can't see their own faults. I don't know what it is.
Yeah, because it's little versions of them and they love themselves. So that actually makes sense. So Ravi said something when he was door knocking that I wanted to bring up. I didn't want to bring it up when he was talking because we were on a tight timeline. But he basically said, he knocked on someone's door and the guy was basically like, listen, I get it. I don't want to have to travel to go see my grandkids because they're never gonna be able to afford to live here. But I really like my community, man, and like I don't want you to change this because I worked my whole life. I'm retired now. I deserve this. I'm paraphrasing. I'm making up what this potential conversation was. And immediately in my mind, I'm like, this guy loves his community more than his grandkids, because that's basically what he's saying, is that he'd rather still have the nice community and willing to travel for his grandkids, other than the alternative, have, a few fourplexes on his block and have his grandkids live in one of them, but the community change. And that opinion, I think I can understand all sides of these opinions. I think it's wherever you are in life, what is important to you. And this goes back to the, said in a much different way when we had Brad Lamb as a guest, where he's like, I got mine, screw everybody else. And that seems to be where this NIMBY comes from, because they worked so hard to get this property. They love their neighborhood and they don't want it to change. But the next generation is going to need it to change, or they're out of luck.
I struggle with it every day, because there's a 7 lot subdivision being built right now, just like a block from me, and parking has become an issue. Parking was not an issue when I moved into my place, but when I moved into my place, I was one of those people that put in a rental downstairs. So I needed to make that work, or to make everything work. The rental goes in, everything. I contribute to that problem, I guess, even though I supply off-street parking to my tenants. But now I'm worried. I found myself saying it to my neighbor the other day. I was like, man, I hope they don't build those ugly flat roof houses over there, because we're in a neighborhood where you have slope roofs, and if you put in 7 flat roof houses, it's going to look stupid.
Right.
But do I need to just get out of my way? I mean, I've got an issue in my neighborhood where I can see a bunch of these units have switched over to tenanted properties over the last few years. Like, people have just kept their homes and rented them out. Every 7 or 8 homes now, there's tall grass and nobody's maintaining those homes at all. I hate that crap. Not in my backyard, right? But I don't know. I'm so down the line right now of like, I want it the way it was, but I also have to get out of the way.
Which sounds like most people's opinion on this, right?
Which is why Ravi said everybody has, there's so many opinions in a room, right?
I can tell you, I've shown properties in Toronto that are in great neighborhoods, beautiful homes, and we go see the property and then we walk outside, and directly across the street at the end of the street is a 50, 60-year-old apartment building that's an eyesore. And my clients most of the time are like, everything's great, but I don't want to look at that every morning.
I got a guy across the street from me that has a blue tarp over his RV.
And that's pissing you off?
To no end. There's nothing worse than a blue tarp in your front yard.
Hey, Steve, go knock on some doors. And if you want to start a homeowners association for your neighborhood and create monthly fees that go into no blue tarps and no flags being hanging from your property. But then it's that guy's right to have a blue tarp. He owns that piece of property. He can do whatever he wants, Steve.
No, trust me. This is the struggle I have. Right. Because my idea for building is good and your idea sucks. And that's the way it goes for everybody, right? Like, what is the measure? This is what so when I think about these types of homes that are going to be built under this new plan, I see my lot being turned into, not now because I got a newer home, but eventually being turned into 3 or 4 side-by-side townhomes. Like, very similar to your old style of townhome, kind of that tandem parking kind of, right? That's what I see being the realistic outcome. And I think it will happen because I think there's actually profit there. But some people are going to do some weird stuff, right?
Yeah,
some people are going to build a 4,000, 5,000 square foot property with 3 400 square foot like little bachelor suites downstairs, right? People are going to do all sorts of different stuff, and I don't know if I'm ready for it. I need to be ready for it. I don't know if I'm ready for it.
Here's what I was also thinking. So in the first 10 years of this being able to be a thing, yes, you're going to see it change, but it's not like every single one of your neighbors is going to knock down their house and build a fourplex, right? So they're slowly going to start popping up. And then maybe in 30 years, it's like a 70-30 for single family homes versus these type of properties. Who knows exactly what it's going to get to. I would actually argue that these type of homes, unless they take over the entire neighborhood, and this is the missing middle that we need, they might actually prop up the value of your house for a long period of time, because there's going to be less and less single family homes.
The people that want the
space.
single family. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So because we know that in the upper price points, like, listen, there's a lot of people with money. There's a lot of people with money in Canada, and they want to buy a house and have privacy, and they'll pay more for it. And if there's less of those homes available, like, I know this is so hilarious that I'm saying this. It's like I'm saying, like, oh no, the rich people won't have as many options anymore, which I know is ridiculous to say, but I think it will actually hold a premium on those properties as well.
I just view, like, I think that's true. Here's what I'm viewing as a possibility, and this is just my fairy tale land that I live in. So I've got 2 kids, and is there a possibility where I can get an old tear down, which is going to be torn down anyway? I can rip that place down, and I can go, let's just picture it in your brain.
Sure.
3 single car garages across the front.
Okay.
This is a 50, 60 foot lot.
Yep.
So 3 single car garages off the front, each with 1 parking pad in front. So you've got parking for 6.
Yep.
The back of that same floor is a 2-bedroom apartment with access to the backyard.
Gotcha.
Probably even a door from one of the...
No, are you putting a basement in?
No, this is a version of half in ground.
Okay,
It
gotcha.
depends on elevation,
Okay,
but
sure.
let's just
Okay.
say we're building 3 stories.
Yep.
Then on top of that floor, so that's garage and 1 apartment unit, right? On top of that, you get 2 side-by-side, fairly then large 3-bedroom townhouses. So main living on 1 floor, like kind of side-by-side, and then 6 bedrooms basically across the top floor that is split between 2 units. So you have 2 side-by-side townhouses, parking below, so it looks like regular townhouses, and then an apartment in the back. Now, I can retire in that first level, ground level unit, 2 bedrooms, whatever, and I can put my kids and their families in the 3 units above. Like, that is where I think the Goldilocks zone is for humble living in the future. I don't think that's actually going to happen.
I think that's a wonderful idea, but let me play the kids being teenagers or early 20s in relationships. They don't want to live in the same complex as mom and dad. They want to go do their thing and start their lives. They want to get the hell out. They want to get as far
But what if they
as
can't?
possible.
What if they can't? What if housing is so affordable that they can't afford rent unless they move to Edmonton?
Then they'll come live with you, is what will happen. But they'll do everything they possibly can. They might, Steve, I would argue most kids, because they're not thinking long-term about financing, they would rather rent a place and pay rent to someone else to have their own space than live for free with their parents.
That was me.
I ask sellers all the time, it's like, would you rather be broke or homeless, so we can determine if you're going to buy or sell first, right? Let's play worst case scenario. And they're always like, yeah, we have somewhere to go. I'm like, is it your parents' place? They're like, yeah. They're like, but we just really don't want to.
Yeah. No, I met with a buyer last night who's, we're living for free in the parents' basement suite, saving. And they're like, yeah, it's time to go. It's like, but we could save longer. Yeah, but it's time to go. So I get that. Trust me. I think it's a utopian vision of what this could be in the future, because, my girls go out and marry other people that have maybe done the same thing, or they leave the province or do whatever. Right. So one thing that's there that we didn't get to is, are those units stratified? Are they?
He did bring that
title?
up, but I don't think he has an answer on that yet.
Yeah. So these are all, like, there's so many questions. I'm just hoping that, he didn't hate me too much and he'll come back on in the future.
No, I think you were reasonable.
I tried to be, right. Because I definitely tend to be tough on the political side of things, just because it's easy to blame other people, I guess. But on my main channel, it's like, hey, here's what you're doing wrong all the time. Not that I have the solutions to maybe do it right. We do here in Surrey feel like we're just an afterthought, though.
You're the middle
right?
child.
We don't have any. We are. What did we used to be able to say? We used to be able to say redheaded stepchild. I don't know if we can say that anymore. But I am a stepchild, so I can say that. I just feel like we're left behind. We don't have proper transit. We never have. It's coming. It's a decade away or more still, and it only services a portion of the city. I don't even know where I'm going with this, but I just feel like it's where I particularly live is an afterthought, and many of these programs are focused on much, I guess, more important areas.
Why are the other areas more important? What makes them important?
Well, I mean, we're the suburbs. We've always had the bad name, right? When everybody makes a joke, they're making a joke about Surrey, even though it's the second biggest city in the province and growing, and soon to be the biggest city by population and landmass, bigger than Vancouver. We are still just always kind of the butt of the joke. And so I think that carries on. Well, why would you want to put that in Surrey? Why would you want to put all that infrastructure in Surrey? And it's like, well, that's because that's where the population really lives, right? But I don't know. I struggle with that all the time because I just don't think we have, for instance, like I think Surrey is the only city that doesn't have some sort of small arena in the whole Lower Mainland. Like Abbotsford has one, Langley has one.
Like a hockey arena?
Yeah, but not like a big one, like a 4,000, 5,000 person like event center.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Right? You could hold a decent concert. Like in Abbotsford, I went and saw Joe Rogan and Kiss, mind you, both in the Abbotsford Arena. Like the Abbotsford Arena is like 5,000, 6,000 people. It's not that big. But they do have the event center, right? They do have enough space to do that sort of thing. And Surrey just doesn't. I mean, I guess it's coming, but they just don't have the infrastructure.
So why do you live in Surrey then? Why don't you move to one of these other places?
Because I'm Canadian and this is where I was born. And
do
it's
they
my
cost more
damn
money?
right to stay here.
But yeah, all I hear you is complaining about the place you live, that's not getting the things you want. Do the things you want exist elsewhere for the same price at which it would cost you to buy in Surrey?
I mean, that's why most of our downsizers do, or most of our affordability people do leapfrog out into the city, right? They go from, let's say, Burnaby and they end up in Surrey, or Surrey to Langley to Abbotsford. So they do get more for their money. I'm just here because I've probably always been here. I think it's the best place to be still. I just wish that there were more community services. Because I think about like, I mean, I've had this discussion with you before. When I've come to Toronto, I spent a lot of time in Markham and Vaughan and a place called Concord, where an old company I don't even know where that is, and an old company I used to work for was there. And that place, sorry if you're listening from those places suck compared to when I actually go downtown Toronto with you, because downtown Toronto was awesome.
Steve, the podcast was just starting to grow really fast, and now you're telling everyone from Vaughan and Markham. No, by the way, I talked to someone from Markham that messaged me the other day. So be nice to people from Markham.
Okay. Well, no. I'm just saying, like, but it's the same where I am, right? Like when you go downtown Toronto, you've got everything, right? Like when your old place, when you would walk out the door, you're like, I'm in the city and I feel cool. I don't even care that I remember coming to visit you and having to walk like 3 blocks and you're like, where did I park last night? Right? There's something about that's kind of fun when I'm visiting you.
Right.
And something about that I hate when someone's parked in front of my house when I'm at home. So I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, it's pretty normal in Toronto streets that the cars on the streets, you don't know whose they are. Maybe they're your neighbors. Maybe like that's just a thing.
Fun though. Like it was kind of like, oh, like this is, and you could also just walk outside and either walk to work or Uber to the place that's a little bit too far to walk. Right? Like you have all of these options. At your old place, especially the condo, you were telling me there was multiple days where you were like, I just didn't drive today. I haven't seen my car in a week because I Ubered a couple places I needed to go to.
I literally, when I lived downtown Toronto, and was selling a lot of real estate, and my office was 2 minutes away. I had a parking spot, whatever. My car sat there. I think the first year of that lease, when I was driving that little A3, I think I did 13,000 kilometers in 1 year. Mm-hmm. And that's just because I had to drive sometimes to like people's cottages or going to hockey in the north end of the city. 13,000 over a year on my car when I was living downtown. And it was great. It was amazing. I could walk to everything. So You know, but that's not for everybody. Some people be like, are you insane? Why would you ever live? It's so loud down there and there's too much going on and you have no privacy. Like, I loved it. I loved the noise.
Yeah. I think I liked really being at both of your places before, but I also didn't bring my kids there. Right?
True.
We weren't going down to a Leafs game at 7:30 at night and getting a pint with my kids. So
yeah, you were on like vacation mode, so you weren't on. You know, it's different.
Say that. Every time I go to a conference in Toronto, my wife says, "Oh, that's your vacation." I'm like, "No, this is work." Don't tell her we have a good time, honey. If you're listening to that, no, she doesn't listen. What am I talking about?
No, we're way too far into the episode for her to be listening.
Speaking of which, we should probably wrap. My team's about to show. We've shot this at a crazy time on a crazy day.
Yep.
So yeah, let's. Hopefully, everybody watches a bonus episode. They like and subscribe, and we're gonna come back in another day or two. I think our next episode is Tim Hudak. So
there's someone before that.
Spoiler alert.
There's someone before that.
No, there isn't, Tom.
Oh, Steve's in control of the schedule. Okay.
Don't give away our secrets, Tom, on when we're shooting things.
Yeah, we are just hitting the political spectrum, even though Tim's not technically in politics anymore. Thank you, everybody. If you watch this on YouTube, I really hope you enjoyed our interview with the minister. I came away from it thinking like he's a really good guy. He's passionate about it. Whether you agree with everything he said or not, I think it's nice to have someone that understands what they're doing in office, making those decisions. You can tell he's a smart guy.
Smart dude,
so
for sure.
I think people from BC should feel fortunate that they have him, whether they agree with everything or not. Because if it's not him, it was going to be someone else, and you wouldn't like what they said either. So I think we just all have to keep that in mind, right? Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. If you have not already, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, like this video, and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.